Okay, inspecting any hive. I'm going to inspect this hive now, just see how they're doing. Inspecting starts by smoking the entrance. You just shoot a couple puffs here and there. You don't want to asphyxiate them, you just want to let them get that scent and let it waft up a bit. Much of beekeeping is patience. If you really want the honey or the smoke to take effect, you give it a second. These bees are telling those bees, everybody's talking to each other, the pheromones are flying, and they're realizing, hey, there could be a fire coming, we need to go in and fill our honey stomachs up. And so they'll be, when I open this hive up, what you'll find is most of the bees will be clustered around the capped honey areas and the nectar areas, filling up their honey stomach, so that in the event that they would have to leave the hive, they've got the necessary building materials to start new honeycomb wherever they might land. That's the whole point of filling up the honey stomachs. Remember, everything that the bees do, everything that they build, is done from nectar and pollen and propolis. So the products of flowers and flowering trees and plants, that's what they've got to work with. So when it's time for them to take off for whatever reason, they need to have a nice full stomach, so that the first thing they do whenever they hit a new area, when a hive swarms and they find a new place, the first thing they do is build comb. It's like building a house. And it really only takes them a couple days. It's amazing how quickly it happens. Okay, ordinarily I'd wait just a little longer, but for the sake of the video, we'll go ahead and open the top now. I'll shoot a little under the top. Again, you probably noticed I kept this telescoping cover propped up. I just put a stick of wood in there, prop it up during the summer so that they get a little ventilation. On this hive I happen to have an inner cover as well. This is a honey super on top, and this was a new hive in March. So it's rare you'd put a honey super on a new hive. But they were doing so well, I thought, what the heck, we'll see how they do. I just put that in front. As they get the idea that, whoops, something's going on, they'll take off and come back into the hive. Okay, I just bought a new gizmo here, also from Brushy Mountain. It's called a hive, or a frame hanger. It goes on the outside of there, and it allows me to pull off a frame and hang it out here and get it out of the way. It's kind of nice. Ordinarily I set that frame on the ground face up or on its side so the bees can fly away and don't crush any. But that's kind of a nice setup right there. I like that. So I'm going to pull these frames. That frame I just put there, I can see that it's comb, but nothing else. Just like this one's comb, nothing else. I gave this hive an extracted super full of frames. In other words, when I extracted honey this year, I had a super full of honey. Once I pulled all the honey out of the frames, I gave them back those kind of empty frames to just lick clean. So anything that we see in here is new honey from them. Remember I told you they'd be sucking up that honey? Here's a good example. That's a capped frame of honey. And again, that's new honey. This is a new hive. They've done that. This was a frame I had already extracted. And that's a hive or a frame in the process of being capped. They pull the moisture out of the honey until it's a little bit below 18% water. Once that happens, they throw a cap on it. And that honey will stay like that for them, so that during the winter, when not as much is blooming and there's not as much food, they've got food in the fridge. So we'll take a look. Here's another frame, nicely capped. I could extract that frame. Here's a beautifully capped frame on both sides. Now this is the kind of frame you definitely extract. That's perfectly extractable honey right there. And they've got a brood frame and another brood frame, so they should have a lot of honey stores in there. If they're putting this much up here, it means they're full down there. I'm going to put these in different order. I wouldn't do that if these were brood frames, but since they're honey frames, I want them to be sure they sort of fill everything out. So I'm going to take an empty frame and put it right here in the middle of where all the full frames were and see if they're encouraged to fill that out more. They tend to do most of their building in the middle of the hive and then build outward. So I like this little frame gizmo. Now we're going to take this top hive off and we'll inspect the brood frame. So to get to this next hive body, what I'm going to do is lift this one up slightly, shoot a little smoke to get everybody off the top rails, let it sit for just a second. I carry a little table around with me just to not put the hive bodies on the ground. The smoker will be blowing smoke right at it and kind of keep them calm. So we pull this hive body off. I place it onto the table, and since they've got that smoke and they're filling up their honey stomachs, they should be perfectly content to just sit there. Okay, these guys are looking pretty good. I'll get my new little hive frame hangy device here. Very handy. The frame's got nothing on it. Again, another outside frame. They tend to leave them alone. Even when I go to 9 frames in a hive, they seem to want to leave that outside frame alone, and I don't know why. Here's an outside frame. Typically will be filled with food, and sure enough, that's the case. Sean, I don't know if you get a shot of that. Completely capped, wall-to-wall capped honey. Now the other side they haven't started working on yet, but they are storing some nectar in there. You can see them working on it right here. And so this is how a hive inspection goes. We just take it apart frame by frame. Now I've got some propolis and wax on top here. I like to scrape that off because it sticks to the upper frames, makes it hard to do the upper frames. Ordinarily, I forgot to, but ordinarily I carry a little jar with me and I just throw that in there. Pound for pound, the wax and the propolis is actually more valuable than the honey. Harvesting propolis is a little more tricky, so I don't do it yet. They're starting to peek up at me again, so we'll send them back down. Now what's going to be critical to me is that I find brood in this second hive body here. If it's all food, that's nice. There's some brood right there, so that's good news. There's capped brood. There's empty spaces. More empty and more capped. I don't see any larvae or eggs in there, so they may have just hatched. And she hasn't gotten around to laying back up there. Fully capped brood. Really great to see. Can you see that, Sean? All the brown? The brood cappings are brown. There's a little bit of capped honey along the outside here.